Good morning and welcome to The Art of Composition. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. I thought I would look at photographs by Elliott Erwitt. And I'm not going to lay grids on them, but I figured I would just go through his images and point out a few things. So let me jump right into that. This is pretty obvious what he's going for here. He is repeating vertical lines throughout this photograph. I don't know if this was staged or not. I think this is his daughter, but he is echoing a theme. And Elliott Erwitt has an incredible sense of humor, and conveying a sense of humor in a photograph is very difficult. And I have never come across a photographer that does it better than Erwitt. I think this is an interesting photograph because you have good figure-ground relationship. You have a dark figure on a lighter background. But one thing you want to notice here is he has curvilinear elements that lead into the main subject. And this is why it's important to take a series of photographs, because you have to time the wave movements to create this effect. And very rarely can you do that in one photograph. For example, here you have a pointing device. It's leading you right into the figure, and then you have this circular element that encloses that figure. And then of course you have more pointing devices here. And I know that's not something most photographers will look for, but when you study design, you pick up on elements like that. In this one, he is clearly echoing a theme. He has a group of geese here, and then a group of girls here. And he's just repeating patterns. Great shot. He has so many photographs. I'm just going to scroll through these. Again, he is playing off elements in this composition. He has the beard of the man, and it's sort of echoing this shapes in the leaves of this tree. And of course, you have good figure-ground relationship. You have a very dark subject on a light background. And one thing you want to be aware of too is how the figure is placed inside these elements here. These are really good overlaps. It's a very clean image. And notice how this line runs into this area here and it kind of moves around. You really have to be aware of that. And subject placement in a composition is critical. This photograph actually reminds me of something Richard Calvar would shoot. But again, here you have this horizontal line here. I would guess this falls on a division on the armature just by looking at it. And the edges are clean. And I talk about that a lot when I'm evaluating work. And again here, dark figure on a lighter background. And notice how he captured this movement here. You have a curvilinear element here, and then you have it repeating here. Looks like a woman. She's obviously, I think she's looking at her shoe. But this photograph wouldn't be nearly as interesting without that movement, because he's repeating curvilinear elements. And then the same thing here. This is a brilliant photograph. This is a masterful design. This is a true artist. When I look at these photographs, this is not something you would typically see in modern street photography. And the biggest gripe I have with modern street photography is that they don't have the design skills that the last generation, or I should say the Cartier-Bresson babies, because that's what they're called. They don't have that elements of design that really make a work of art. And this is absolutely brilliant. Great photograph. John F. Kennedy there. It's interesting because Elliott Erwitt shot a lot of different formats, even though he primarily stuck with 35mm. He also tells a story, and like I said, I have never seen a photographer do it as well as he does. And you literally laugh out loud at some of his photographs. But again, he goes to museums, and I'm sure he practices. This is why I always suggest going to museums. You can find a lot of interesting photographs. And a lot of times I'll go just to practice, but sometimes I photograph people at museums. This is a great photograph to demonstrate really good overlapping. You have a lot of figures here, and how these elements overlap, you can create a movement throughout all these figures, and it's clean. They're nice overlaps. It has a third dimension to it. And as I've said before, Bresson was brilliant at that. You know, it's interesting, when I would look at Bresson's work when I was into street photography, I could never figure out why his images looked three-dimensional until I learned design. And it wasn't the Leica, it was how he overlaps his elements. He knows what to look for. He moves back and forth, up and down. And I do this when I photograph now too. And this has nothing to do with grids. When I'm looking at a scene, I'm moving back and forth slightly, not a lot, and I'm looking at how the elements overlap. And it really does make a difference. So the next time you're out photographing, experiment with it. And here he's echoing the profile here. Notice how he has clean breaks in the edges. Always look at the edges before you snap the shutter. That's something I learned from Konstantin Manos. And again, he's shooting square here. This photographer, Erwitt, has a massive body of work. It's unreal. But I think he's in his 80s now. And here he's repeating a diagonal line. It's pretty clear what he's going for. But notice how he has one figure that stands out above the rest. Most of the figures are turned away or turned down. And she is facing up, and she has her arm bent in a dramatic pose. She has a very dramatic pose right here, and she stands out amongst all the other ones. So here's your dominant subject right here. And I know some of these things that I point out might seem small, but they really do make the difference between an okay photograph and a masterpiece. He also photographed a lot of dogs. I have one of his books. I think it's just called Dogs. I don't think he does too much color. I just want to point out a few things here. He really does. He has a wide variety of subject matter too. This is a really tender moment. Good figure-ground relationship. Gazing direction. There's a story here. The edges are clean. There's nothing that distracts the viewer on the edge. Good figure-ground relationship here. I always like this photograph. Very dramatic and very funny. Erwitt really understands composition, and he's an excellent storyteller. I have a friend that bought a few of his prints. She bought 2 of his prints. I think they were around $5,000 for both of them. I can't say I really like his color stuff all that much, but I think his black and white is, to me, it appeals to me a little bit more. But again, you have this curvilinear element that leads you in to the subject here. So you have an entry point here and then here. Then you have a circular movement right here with the splashing of the waves. This is a great photograph. This stuff I don't really understand here. Not sure what that's about, but I could pass on that. I always thought this was an adorable photograph. But again, he's breaking the image on divisions of the rectangle. And these divisions in the background are important, and where he's placing his subject, the space around her. This stuff matters. It really does. But notice here how he's shooting a series of photographs. And I don't believe in this one-shot ideology stuff. You know, William Eggleston was okay with it because he was shooting subjects that for the most part didn't move. But when you're doing candid work, you really have to shoot more than one. I'm not saying get sloppy, but and here he's repeating diagonal lines. You have this movement here, which is creating energy moving here. Then you have these diagonal lines repeating this movement. You have a burst of energy here. I believe he's dividing it on the square here, or very close to it. But again, this is something Richard Calvar does. He's repeating a theme: feet, feet, and foot. But again, good figure-ground relationship. If the shoe was the same shade as this background, it wouldn't work. You have a dark object on a light background, and the hand which stands out on this dark area here. And then this is pretty obvious. It looks simple, but it's really not. Notice how the line goes slowly into the dog. Right here in the nose, it continues on. That matters. You have a nice curvilinear element right here. And these small details you really have to be aware of when you're evaluating your photographs. If I saw this scene, I would shoot maybe 5-10 frames, because these types of elements, they're hard to get in one shot. Just something to keep in mind. Interesting here how it's a vertical version of the horizontal image I just looked at. I have a section in my user's guide about shooting vertically versus horizontally. Light figure, clearly separated from the background. You have a dark area here, She's pulling this way, the dog's going the opposite way. You have a conflict, a visual tug of war. Beautifully designed. He has so many photographs. It's endless. I just want to point out a few more. And again, he shoots in a series. I was looking at some of his contact sheets, and he'll literally shoot 36 of one scene. And he is telling an entire story with those images, and they're all good. It's amazing. Here's an example of that. I think I was reading he was following this couple with the umbrella, and they couldn't get it down, so he followed them around and shot a whole series of images. The subject, their face, stands out from their background. Nice negative shapes in here. Good negative space. This is great. Nice movement. You're going like this and around. Great overlapping. Nice crop. This, of course, is a famous photograph. Nixon. And I believe I saw the contact sheets for this. It was 1 out of 36 images. Nice separation. The ball is clearly readable. This reminds me of a Brazan shot. Brazan photographed a lot in Russia. I have one of his books. It's called About Russia, and it looks very similar to that. I'll just try to find a few more. Very dramatic right here. Repeating diagonal lines here and here. And of course you have this curvilinear element. And then you have the woman in the background. Nicely spaced, good separation. This is a great photograph. Try one more page. I always love this photograph. Everything is readable. Clean edges. The figure clearly stands out from the background. This would make a beautiful print. But that's going to be it for today. I appreciate you tuning in, and I will be doing a few more of these on some of the other Magnum photographers. But thanks for joining me.